Is this DC Multiverse Superman vs. Doomsday box set everything we've been hoping for? Or was this Target exclusive 2-pack doomed from the start? Stick around and find out. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Starting with the packaging, and already we get a sense for just how big this Doomsday is. Since it's a store exclusive, we do have the gold label in the corner, but down here is a special graphic signifying that this is Superman's 85th anniversary. On the side it just says it's Superman vs. Doomsday. On the bottom is the UPC for those who want it, and then on the back we have two images. One is a more recent image of Doomsday with Superman in his clutches. Notice that Superman isn't all that battle damaged. Keep this in mind because it's going to be important for presentation. But then on this side we get the iconic cover to Superman number 75, The Death of Superman. Keep this in mind because it's going to be important to playability. Sliding the tray out, we get a really cool display of Metropolis in ruins. If the blisters for the figure stands and trading cards weren't glued to it, I'd love to have used it as a backdrop for the figures, but again, we're going to come back to that during playability. As for this category, for packaging, I'm giving Superman vs. Doomsday 1 whole point. Moving on to presentation, and Superman stands at a statuesque 7 inches, but Doomsday towers over him at 9.5 if you count the hair. Clark is near complete reuse with the body and cape coming from Superman the Infected, with the head sculpt and costume color scheme coming from Hush. This time around they decide not to give him the laser eyes. They also made him look a bit less gray. Considering that he's powered by the sun, it is nice to see Superman with some color in his cheeks. He's also got a little bit of blood around the mouth, a scuff on the forehead, muddy boots, at least the way I think that's mud, and some tears and scuffs painted on the body. Flipping him around, and wait a minute, no S-Shield? No S-Shield on battle-damaged Superman? The one based on Superman 75? The single most iconic image of Superman's cape in all of comic history, and they left it blank. If you're giving me a Death of Superman 2-pack, this is the Superman I want. Failing that, I'd be okay with this. But if we're being honest, this is really lazy. Granted, the new budget went to Doomsday, and that budget was so tight they couldn't even afford to give him new arms. Instead, the arms are reused from Devastator. On the one hand, that doesn't bother me, until you step back and realize that Doomsday is mostly all forearm. Seriously, just look at how small and thin the upper arm is compared to the lower arm. He's pretty much Popeye. Also, Devastator had tattered sleeves, which they just left unpainted, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That being said, I do like the sculpt of all the new pieces. The face, with all of its bony protrusions, is fantastic. I love all the dry brushing to bring out that craggy detail, and I'm happy to say that most of the bony protrusions are a nice soft rubber, so they don't hurt you. As far as painted details go, they did a great job on all the shadowing in the face. I particularly like the glowing eyes. In the comic, there was a bony cage protecting the eyes, but from an engineering standpoint, I don't know how they could have done that and painted the eye underneath, so I'm okay with this. I'm less okay with this Ariana Grande ponytail. Don't get me wrong, I know the Doomsday has looked like that in the comic, but not this comic. And referring back to the box, this is the comic it's supposed to be based on. Even the glamour shot of Doomsday himself doesn't have it. Oh, and while we're here, take a look at the S-Shield on the back of Superman's cape. All I'm saying is, if McFarlane wanted to do the top pony, fine. Do it as a single-carded Megafig release for those who can't find the Target 2-pack, and then make the 2-pack version accurate to the comic upon which it's based. My big concern is they're going to do the Death of Superman accurate version as a single-carded Megafig and expect us to buy it all over again. Moving on down, we have his tattered green shorts, which are also a lot brighter than they were in the comic, and his big old green boots. Again though, great job on the bony protrusion sticking out from underneath. Looking at the sculpt though, and I can't help but think that that's supposed to be silver. Flipping him around, and here's Doomsday in all his glory from the back. I feel like I've been mainly negative, but there is a lot to like here too. That said, there have been some cut corners, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point that out. If this quote-unquote battle-damaged Superman was being sold by itself for $22.99, would you buy it? I don't think I would, and I'm definitely not going to buy this Doomsday again if all they do is give him a different head and some darker green. It might not be exactly what I want, but for what it is, I like it well enough. Even so, for presentation, I'm giving Superman vs. Doomsday half a point. Moving on to posability, and since every action figure is somebody's first, I am going to go over this, but since I've looked at this body a bajillion times, we're going to be doing it faster than a speeding bullet. This far up, that far down, pretty decent tilt, and all the way around. Arms can raise up this high, forward and back with a rotator cuff, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, and McFarlane wrists that swivel and hinge in every direction. Moving to the middle, and Superman has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. It's really loose and he keeps popping apart, but he can arch back this far and hunch forward this far. He can also tilt and twist. Oh, and twist. Moving on down, he's got McFarlane style hips. He can only kick this high, but he can split this wide. Bit of twist at the hip, but not as good as usual. Double jointed knees, toe articulation, and ankles that can swivel, hinge, and pivot. The one that I'm sure you're way more interested in is Doomsday. His head's in a dumbbell joint with a really wide berth. It's a bit on the loose side, so no trouble looking up and down. And of course, we've got Ariana Doomsday working side to side. Moving on down, he can only raise his arms up this high. He's got a rotator cuff, but he doesn't so much get up and down as much as he kind of just flops around. Single jointed swivel elbows really highlight just how spindly those biceps are, and all the way at the end of the arm he has wrists that can swivel and hinge. Moving to the middle, and Doomsday also has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. Based on these cavernous gaps, I think I found a vulnerable spot. Doomsday can arch back this far and hunch this far. Great range for the tilt and twist. He can kick this high, do a perfect split, not a bad amount of twist. Single jointed knee, they can actually swivel, no toe articulation believe it or not, and ankles that can only hinge and pivot. If you've been paying attention, you might notice that this figure is really loose. The joints are there on Doomsday, but the more I mess with them, the looser they get and the floppier he becomes. And that's to say nothing of Superman's problem. For posability, I'm giving Superman vs. Doomsday another half a point. Moving on to playability, and I want to do something a bit different and talk about the insert tray. I've been told that if you apply heat, you can peel the blister off without damaging the tray. I personally went at it for about 10 minutes with a blow dryer and I couldn't get it to budge. I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm just saying that wasn't my experience. And it's a shame because this could have been a fun backdrop. If only McFarlane would use their page puncher method of little baggies for that. On that note, McFarlane also usually includes some really cool display bases with their 2-packs. And how perfect would it have been if they just had some generic rubble with Superman's cape? Not to make comparisons, but that's what DC Icons did, and that was on top of a proper battle-damaged Superman. Otherwise, the Superman comes preloaded with some gestury hands, but his only accessories are a pair of flight hands. The fact that they didn't include any fists is a real head-scratcher. In the comic, they literally punch each other to death. That said, if you want a pair of compatible fists, I went through my entire collection and the closest match I could find was Endless Winter Black Adam. As is, though, they do come with trading cards and figure stands. But playability is more than just missed opportunities with accessories and display bases. It's also about how well your figures play with others. This time I'm going to be focusing mainly on different versions of Superman. Moving from smallest to largest, and here's the original DC Icons. Technically 6-inch scale, but way too tiny. Next up, unsurprisingly, is the other DC Icons. Also a bit too small. Moving over to Mezco, and here's the 1/12 Collective Man of Steel version. I know I'm way behind, but I do have a video of him coming out. Traveling all the way back to 2003 is this Superman from a Batman 2-pack. Also by Mattel is this DC Universe Classic Superman from the Gotham City 5-pack. Jumping ahead, and here's the New 52 by DC Collectibles, and then back to History of the DC Universe by DC Direct. From DC Direct to DC Collectibles, and here's Superman from the DC Essentials line, but for one of the prizes of my collection, and here's a John Byrne style Superman by DC Direct. For our first McFarlane figure, and here's the ever popular Page Punchers, but for a truly special piece, and here's Superman from the DC vs. Dark Horse 2-pack by NECA. Moving squarely into DC Multiverse, and here's Action Comics 1000, and the Angry Laser Eyes version of Hush. For your consideration, and here's my own combination of the Rebirth head on the Dark Knight Returns body, and finally, for my largest Superman, the Kal-El to stand above them all, Henry Cavill. For just a few members of the Superman family though, and here we have the DC Essentials Supergirl, Con-El Superboy, and John Kent Superman. For a few other Superman villains, and here's Lex Luthor, Bizarro, General Zod, and Superboy Prime. Since they were in the Doomsday comic and had their clocks cleaned, here's Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. For a few Megafigs, and here's Doomsday with Mongol, Ain't No Calabac Girl, and Darkseid. And then for my own curiosity, here he is with the Marvel Select Immortal Hulk. For a relative scale comparison, here's Doomsday with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man. And as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. 'Tis merely a flesh wound. The death of Superman is such an iconic story that cutting any corners feels like a real missed opportunity. But if we're honest, Megafigs almost never come with any accessories, so this is pretty par for the course. For playability, I'm giving this box set 1 whole point. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price, and this exclusive set will set you back $60. That's essentially the standard price for a Megafig and a standard basic figure. I think I've been pretty clear that I don't think this Superman is worth it. Doomsday, however, is a different story. Currently, the only other large-scale Doomsday figures are by Storm Collectibles and Mattel. New in box, and either of those figures go anywhere from $170 to $200. At only $60, this Doomsday might not be everything I ever wanted, but that's not the end of the world. For price, I'm giving Superman vs. Doomsday 1 whole point for a grand total of 4 out of 5. So, if you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.